Hey, in this recording, I thought I'd demonstrate to you how Kerberos Authentication works directly against the Zscaler Internet Access service. So to get going, I thought it'd be good to just run you through what Kerberos configuration actually means. I'm running on a Mac, so I have to be domain joined, and for that to happen, we have to make sure that we're actually connected to my domain controller or to my domain. My domain here is Welsh Geek, and as part of that, my workstation is domain joined. We can see the domain controller, and it'll talk to the Active Directory to be able to do that. So I'm logged on here as a user. If I do klist, I can see I've got a Kerberos ticket granting ticket. I can do a kdestroy -a, get rid of my ticket, so I can do a kinit and get my ticket. I've got a couple of other configurations on here that are worth considering. So if we cat /edc pam.d /authorization, it says that I can authorize using the Kerberos shared object to log on to the machine, and it also will I can use this shared object to also unlock my screen. And what that means is that if I do a kdestroy, I say delete all my Kerberos tickets, and I then go off and lock my machine and unlock it, that will also go off and get my Kerberos ticket. So it's well worth having this kind of configuration on your Mac if you're going to do Kerberos authentication with the Mac. So machine's able to do that. What we can do is we can take a look at edc kerb5.conf. A couple of things on my domain. My domain is welshgeek.net. I've got DNS lookup on the KDC set to true. And it just says, welshgeek.net. My default domain is welshgeek.net, and I've got a bunch of other configurations here as well. And I'm going to be using the Zscaler 2 cloud for my demonstration today, and I have to explicitly configure the KDC for Zscaler 2. And the way that ticketing works when we get into it is that we're going to pass tickets between my domain and Zscaler. So how does the DNS lookup work? So if we do a dig srv _kerberos _tcp, because we're going to use TCP as the protocol, welshgeek.net, we'll go off and it'll say, okay, so server record, it tells me priority 100, TCP port is 88, and my domain controller is dc2.welshgeek.net. So that's how all of that is working. It's worth just taking a look at your Active Directory to understand the structure that's in place. So if you've got subdomains and things like that, you've delegated authentication, child domains, transitive trusts, to understand how that resolution and those cross-realm authentications work. In my trust relationships, if I click properties on this, I can see that I've got a trust to Zscaler 2, and it's a non-transitive trust, and I've set that up here. I need to make sure it supports AES encryption because we are going to be passing Kerberos tickets across, and they need to make sure that they're encrypted. You may want to use, if you've got multiple trusts, multiple domains, you might need to set up multiple instances between those domains. Here's my domain welshgeek.net. If I've got child domains off that, I may need to set up additional trust relationships with Zscaler 2. Remember that the password is going to be the same. So my trust relationship is all set up there. What I'll do then is I'll come to admin.zscaler2.net just to take you through what's necessary on the Zscaler side. And once we log in here, we'll come to administration and authentication settings. I've got my Kerberos configuration here. I could show you the password. I'm not going to do that, of course. And that's there necessary to create those trust relationships. And it's important to understand Kerberos is an authentication mechanism for Zscaler. It is not an authorization mechanism. And what we mean by that is that the users need to be created and the groups and everything need to be synchronized into Zscaler for you to be able to apply policy on them. So if the user doesn't exist, and I might demonstrate this to you in a later stage, if I deleted this user, the user would not be able to then authenticate to Zscaler. So you need a provisioning process to get the user accounts in there. There are a couple of different ways to get user accounts into Zscaler. You could manually create them, not ideal for a large organization. You can use LDAP synchronization to grab the users in. You can use SAML. You could SAML authenticate a user at one point in time. That would create the users in Zscaler and the groups and use auto provisioning to do that. And then they would exist for subsequent Kerberos authentications to Zscaler. Doesn't really necessarily make sense to do that, because if you've got the ability to use SAML, potentially you should just use SAML all over everywhere. But there are scenarios where Kerberos is important to use. The other thing you could do is you could use SCIM. SCIM would be able to synchronize users and groups across to Zscaler for the authorization to be applied on, and of course that configuration for the authentication. Now the challenge with that is Active Directory doesn't natively support SCIM. There are third-party products that do. Okta, for example, Ping Identity does as well. Or you could use Azure AD, and Azure AD being able to pass the SCIM credentials and everything across to Zscaler and still do your authentication using Kerberos to your Active Directory and the cross-realm trust across to Zscaler. So everything's now set up. I've got my user accounts synchronized into Zscaler. I've got my Kerberos ticket on my client. What's going to happen next? So I'm going to use Firefox in the first part of this demo, and I'm going to use my pack file here, which is the Kerberos pack file. I'm going to click OK on that. Before I come to that, let me actually show you what that pack file looks like. The Kerberos pack file is here. I've got a couple of things that I want to send direct, as you normally would with a pack file. We're going to proxy to port 8800, and we actually use that rather than just a gateway variable, we're going to use the gateway host variable. And that's really important because Kerberos only works with FQDNs. You can't send a Kerberos ticket to an IP address. So if you return the gateway variable, it'll just return an IP address, and that's great. That resolves any need to do DNS resolution. In this case, it's going to return a variable called gateway host, which is going to be an FQDN. So if we curl that file, pack.zscaler2.net, welshgeek.net, kerberos.pack, you'll see that it's actually returning an FQDN for the host. It's actually the IP address of the host returned in an FQDN, similar to how namespace is done with AWS, if you're familiar with that. So this is going to tell me proxy to this host on this port, and we should be good. I've got my ticket granting ticket, so everything should just work. If we go to http www.cat.com, my favorite website because it's nice and easy to type, away we go. It comes through, no problem. And if we do a K-list now, we can see that what happened was I went off, I've already got my ticket granting ticket, and so I went and got another ticket granting ticket for Zscaler2.net from welshgeek.net, and so this is a cross-realm ticket, and that cross-realm ticket was then presented to Zscaler2 to get a service ticket for the Zen, and that then worked, and I was authenticated through the node and able to return that content. Other things you might want to do, just to prove this is working to yourself, you could just do a curl. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to curl I'm going to set my gateway to simply gateway.zscaler2.net, port 8800, HTTP ip.zscaler.com, CGI bin index.cgi. This is our IPs page. And what I'm going to say is -- proxy negotiate. And I'm going to send it a user credential, which basically says use my current logged on user. And all of that should go through, which it did. In fact, if we do that with a -v, we pipe it through more, and in fat finger it more, you'd actually be able to see what's going on. Here's the initial request, and it sent the proxy authorization header, proxy negotiate, and then we got a 200 OK. If we go through that again and do a k-destroy -a, klist, okay, let's go back to first principles. We do that klist again, run that command again. You'll see a bit more detail of what's going on with a bit of luck. Oh no, it just went off and got the negotiate ticket. I was hoping it was going to actually show you the 407. But in my case, because I used gateway.zscaler2, it was still able to go and get that service ticket. And that's all because of that Kerberos kerb5.conf file, given that configuration. So I'm able to do that, no problem. So let's go ahead in here and set my system preferences on my Ethernet adapter, and we'll use the same pack file, http pack.zscaler2.net, welshgeek.net, kerberos.pack. Okay, click apply, and now that means that my native browsers, I will just quit and reopen it. The native browsers such as Safari, cat.com, again it went off and got the service ticket because of the pack file. Or I can also let's make sure it's there. Do it with Chrome. This is going to have a problem because it needs to log in, possibly. Let's go to cat.com. Again, was also able to get those tickets. So it was going to work across all the different browsers on the machine. Any system service that can use Kerberos will be able to authenticate. Okay, so traffic's passing through the Zscaler node, authenticated. If I do a klist, I've got my tickets here. If I come to my browser, let me just refresh this page, the ip.zscaler.com, see that I'm going through the node and authenticated, and because of the pack file, I've got my my tickets here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come into my network preferences, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to disable my LAN adapter, and then I'm going to enable my Wi-Fi. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect, if I make it available, to my personal hotspot. By connecting to my personal hotspot on my mobile phone, I'll be totally off the network. There we go. I've lost my remote desktop connection now. So I'm off the network, and what we'll do is we'll just come in here, we'll just check these proxies. My proxy setting is set to kerberos.pack again. Now, I've got my Kerberos tickets here. They're still valid, and they're valid for 10 hours. So my curl will continue to work because the Kerberos ticket is still valid. The pack file, pack Zscaler 2.net, welshgeek.net, Kerberos.pack, is still available, and it's still returning. It's 165.225.80.41 is the first, and 88.41 is second. So this ticket is still going to be valid, which means that if I open up my browser here and I refresh this page, that ticket is still going to be valid. And if I go to News, BBC, UK, the ticket is still valid at that point. So everything is okay because I've still got these Kerberos tickets. So what happens if I do a K destroy -A at this point? No longer got any Kerberos tickets. If I K in it, it won't be able to get a new ticket. And what that means is for this curl, that will fail. It just sends the 407 and it says negotiate, but it'll just fail. There's no supported mechanism. I can't get a Kerberos ticket, and I can't fall through to anything like a SPNIGO, a challenge response kind of authentication. Some people say it's a basic authentication. It's not. It's a challenge response, and there's still authentication, encryption going on. If I go back to this page and refresh, in fact, we'll go to a different page. Let's go to cat.com. It'll fail, and the operation couldn't be completed because there was no domain, there was no network able to grant a Kerberos ticket. So being aware of what Kerberos means and what the failures mean can present a challenge for roaming users using Kerberos. There are alternative solutions. You could open up the KDC directly on the internet. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. You could also make the KDC available through something like Zscaler Private Access and grant users access to continue getting Kerberos tickets. But of course, if you're using Zscaler Private Access to do that, well, you might as well, you're obviously using Zscaler app, so you might as well use Zscaler Internet Access with Zscaler app as well. So Kerberos kind of is precluded by using Zscaler app. So I've shown you everything here on the Mac. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to turn my Wi-Fi off and I'm going to come back on network. Back on network now. I can run my KInit. I'm rushing, so I'm getting fat fingered. There we go, K-list. So I'm back on network. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across to my Windows 10 machine. The Windows 10 machine is probably something you're going to see more of. And we'll just run through how it looks on here. So I can K-list here. Commands are slightly different. K-list purge. It'll go off and get tickets. If I open up my browser here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in here, Internet Options, Connections, and Settings, untick Auto Detect. Now I want to use my configuration script, HTTPS, pack, Zscaler2.net, WelshGeek.net, Kerberos.pack. I come in here and I go ip.zscaler.com. Going through the node and I'm authenticated. If I come back here and run klist, my machine will automatically go off and get the ticket granting ticket because I'm logged into a domain joined machine. So slightly different behavior after a purge. It then went off and it got, here's the first ticket, the ticket granting ticket for WelshGeek.net. This is the cross-realm ticket, the ticket granting ticket from WelshGeek.net to Zscaler 2, and then here's the service ticket issued by Zscaler 2 for Gateway. The same is true in Firefox. Firefox on Windows, slightly different configuration. In this case, it's just using my system proxy sensor. It's going to read it from there. Same kind of behavior. And then I go to ip.zscaler.com. And it's able to identify that. Let's try a different page, facebook.com, and even though it's in this case, this certificate is issued by my intermediate, we could also go to something like hspc.co.uk, and this is the important consideration with Kerberos. When it's unintercepted SSL, you're still able to get authenticated for unintercepted traffic in the same way that you could with a Zscaler Internet Access tunnel from Zscaler app. So it's 407 authentication. It's an authenticated connection to the proxy rather than a cookie-based authentication mechanism. So hopefully this is useful. What you've seen is Kerberos Authentication to the Zscaler Internet Access service. I've shown you how that works on Windows and on Macs, and I've even given you some detail on how a Mac integration with Kerberos works, both in terms of some of those PAM-D files to make sure that you get those Kerberos tickets on login, as well as on screensaver lock, you'll get those tickets reissued, and also what that looks like in your kerb5.conf file. And that kind of can be replicated across any other kind of Linux-based operating system, or you might also want to use key tab files to cache those credentials. So hope this is useful. Please like or comment on the video. Thank you very much for your feedback. Cheers.